As someone who's lived in the city of Surrey for over 30 years, there's certain things about this city that I didn't actually know about up until recently. And that's why in this video, I'm going to tell you about the 5 things that you probably didn't know about Surrey. So let's get right into it. Starting us off, Surrey used to be known as the City of Parks. This was prior to the change of its slogan, which is now "The future lives here." And Surrey was known as a city of parks for a good reason. That's because there's over 800 parks in this city, 200 that have amenities for people, and 600 more to protect natural areas, open space, and biodiversity. On top of that, there's over 650 kilometers of trails and paths to walk along, run along, or bike along. And from my time living here, I've never seen a city that protects its parks and green spaces better than Surrey does. Not only that, but they put a lot of money and time into maintaining and improving the parks as well. As someone who used to work for the city of Surrey, and my wife actually worked in the parks division, I got to see this firsthand. And these range from all different types of parks, whether they have sports facilities, whether it's playgrounds, whether it's beside a community center. Some of them are just big open green spaces, others have water parks. There's really just all kinds across the city. And just a couple of my favorite parks across the city, which you should definitely check out if you're not familiar with, are Fleetwood Park, Tynehead Park, Holland Park, Bear Creek Park, Green Timbers Urban Forest, Redwood Park, and then a couple of bonus, well, not exactly parks, but Crescent Beach and then White Rock Beach, although it's not technically Surrey, but hey, it's close enough. And if you live in the Lower Mainland, you know that we just continue to densify and build, so having these green spaces is such a great feature. And even though the city is growing so rapidly, it's nice to see that the city actually cares about this. Moving on to point number 2, that's that Surrey carries a negative stigma, but it comes with a bit of a bias. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, the majority of people that I talk to that talk poorly of Surrey, number 1, have never actually spent a lot of time here, never lived here, and for the most part have only visited some of the worst neighborhoods. So generally they're going to hop on the Sky Train, head into Whalley, or spend a little bit of time in Newton or along Scott Road. And personally, these are 2 of my least favorite neighborhoods across the city. Or on the other hand, these people haven't actually spent any time there whatsoever. They're just watching the news, talking to friends, or something along these lines. Because like any city out there, there's good and bad parts of the city. Let's take Vancouver for example. If I dropped you off on East Hastings and you didn't get to see any other parts of Vancouver, what do you think you would think about Vancouver? You obviously wouldn't think it's a very nice place. But we all know that Vancouver is beautiful and there's tons of amazing spots across the city. And honestly, this is pretty much true with any city. So you can't just take the worst parts of a city and then blanket the rest of the city with the same judgment. You have to actually be willing to give it a chance. And so this is super important when I have people come to me and ask, "Hey Alex, where should I move to? Where should I live?" Because as I said, I've lived in the city of Surrey for over 30 years. I know where the good spots are. I know where the bad spots are. And overall, there are far more good than bad. But the bad is, well, bad. And this leads us into point number 3, is that people like to make it very clear where in Surrey they're from. The reason being is, as I said, there are bad neighborhoods that people don't really want to be associated with. So some of the primary examples here are, you'll always hear people say, "Oh, I'm from South Surrey," or they'll just say, "I'm from White Rock," if they're from South Surrey, even though realistically it's all part of Surrey, but they want to make that differentiation. The same goes for Cloverdale or sometimes Fraser Heights. And honestly, Cloverdale almost identifies with Langley a little bit more, but we'll just leave it at that. And the reason for this is because of our previous point, the fact that Surrey does carry this negative stigma that's kind of stuck around for years and years and isn't fully warranted. Because when you really look at it and break it down, Surrey is massive. It's 2.5 times the size in land mass of Vancouver, and its population as of 2024 is over 630,000. This makes it the 2nd largest city in all of BC, only behind Vancouver, which it's set to potentially surpass by the year 2030 or sometime around then. And its actual geographical area is 316 kilometers squared, which makes it the third largest city by landmass, and that's only behind Abbotsford and Prince George in all of BC. So if you've been to Vancouver before, you probably haven't visited all the different parts of the city. So if you haven't even done that, how could you fully explore Surrey and figure out what you like, what you don't like, rather than just making a blanket statement? So all I'm saying is to give it a chance. Next up is the fact that the streets in Surrey are run on a grid system. So what I mean by this is you got avenues and you got streets. So the avenues are gonna run from south to north, from 0 Avenue to around 117th Avenue, or basically just south of the Fraser River and the South Fraser Perimeter Road, also known as Highway 17. And then for your streets, they're gonna run from west to east, increasing in that direction. And basically you're gonna have from 120th or Scott Road to 196th, and 196th is gonna be the border with Langley. So because of this, it makes Surrey very easy to navigate if for some reason you don't have a phone and you don't have Google Maps, because you can basically just follow the numbers and follow the coordinates in order to get to your destination. This is very different than going to a city like Vancouver or Toronto, where you're gonna have to know the names of the streets and they don't necessarily go in any specific order. So even if you're not super familiar with the city and you haven't been here very many times, you can pretty much get yourself around. Now, there are a few different neighborhoods in Surrey that do have specific street names, and these neighborhoods have specific names. A couple examples are Cowtown and Birdland. So Cowtown is located in Cloverdale and it has different street names such as Jersey, Friesen, and Aberdeen. Then you got Birdland out in Guildford and you've got street names such as Swallow Drive, Pheasant Drive, Robin Crescent, Hummingbird Park, and even Canary Drive. Now there's other neighborhoods across Surrey similar to these, however I just wanted to provide you with a couple of examples. So once again, the big bonus here is that it's easy to get around. And this can also be helpful with some of the newer streets and neighborhoods that haven't fully been put into Google Maps or any of the other GPS softwares, because sometimes you'll put in an address and it won't recognize it, or it'll take you to the wrong place. However, you should be able to find it again using the coordinate system. Additionally, sometimes they can get confused when we have a street like 85A or 85B. So just keep these things in mind, because these are going to be streets that would be found between 85th and 86th Avenue. And now moving on to point number 5, which is the most shocking to me and something that I didn't actually know about growing up in Surrey. And that's the fact that you can find floodplains across the city. So this was absolutely crazy to me when I first learned about it, and the fact that the coastal floodplain area spans over 20% of Surrey's land. Now that seems like a lot of land, and it definitely is, especially due to the fact that, as we already covered, Surrey is a massive land space. Now it's not quite as bad as it may seem when you first hear this. However, over 2,500 people will be affected in residential areas and neighborhoods if we ever do see any flooding. So now I'm going to share my screen with you and just give you a bit of an overview of where these floodplains are so that you're aware. However, I will also put a link down in the description if you'd like to look into them further, as it is on the Cosmos City of Surrey mapping online system, so you can check that out for yourself. But essentially, as you can see on the map, anything that is highlighted in red is going to be a flood prone area. So as we can see up along the northern part of Surrey, along the Fraser River, in kind of the Bridgeview, Fraser Heights, and Port Kells areas. However, for the most part, there aren't a ton of houses aside from the Bridgeview area. This is kind of down below the train tracks here along the Fraser River, and basically it's primarily industrial. Now moving on along, we can see the floodplains here going through Cloverdale, specifically the lowlands here and the Serpentine area. And so again, there are some farms down here, but there's not a ton of actual housing here. However, it does somewhat extend a little bit into the Fleetwood area, but once again, you just want to make sure that your home isn't in one of these flood prone areas. And so in the Serpentine area, the reason for the flooding here is due to the Serpentine River as well as the 𝐁𝐸 River. And you can't see it that clearly on this map. However, you can definitely find it on another one or go to Google Maps if you'd like. And then as we move further along, we can actually see down here in Crescent Beach and Mud Bay that it continues to be a floodplain as well. And so this is definitely an area that you want to potentially watch out for because there's definitely some very expensive and beautiful houses in the Crescent Beach area, but unfortunately they are in a flood risk area. So it's just something to keep in mind. And then lastly, we move along the Campbell River area down here, and this basically runs along 8th Avenue as well as the Glades Park, King George Corridor, and a little bit of Pacific Douglas. So you'll just want to make sure that you're double checking on which neighborhood you're planning to move into. So there are additional resources on the City of Surrey's website if you'd like to look into that. As I mentioned before, I will put them down in the description. But if you're like myself, this was a huge surprise the first time I heard it because I really just didn't think of Surrey as being a place that would be prone to floods. And honestly, it hasn't really impacted me personally. I have seen some level of flooding on certain streets when there's been heavy rainfall, but that's about it. But with climate change and everything else going on, it's something that you just need to be aware of. However, something to note and that should give you a little bit more peace of mind is the fact that Surrey has one of Canada's best flood management systems. Now, you obviously shouldn't just rely solely on this, however, it is nice to know. And so there you have it, the 5 things that I bet you didn't know about Surrey. And if you already did happen to know some of these things, well, you're a smart cookie. But I'd love to hear from you. Is there anything that should have made this list that you think I could have added? Or conversely, is there anything that you think is obvious and shouldn't have made the list? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're someone who is trying to learn more about the city of Surrey because maybe you're considering making a move here, then you should definitely consider subscribing to my channel as I make new videos every week talking about the city of Surrey, Langley, surrounding cities, and the real estate market. I am a residential realtor who specializes in the Surrey and Langley areas, so if you are considering buying, selling, or just want to have a conversation about real estate or the cities themselves, you can scroll down and click the first link in the description to book a call with me at a time that works best for you. Thanks so much for watching, and before you get out of here, make sure you check out another video on my channel, and we'll see you in the next video.